Good morning, Pensacola. Wow, I have been trying to get down here when I was at Fleet Forces for 4 years, and now I finally made it. And man, I'm glad I came in January. What a beautiful time of the year. It's great to be here with sailors, Marines, Coast Guardmen, civilian instructors and students who make this installation the beating heart of our aviation enterprise. From the schoolhouse to the flight line and the hospital to the training fields, what happens on this base sets the foundation for naval air power across the fleet. I've been looking forward to this visit because Pensacola isn't just a base. It's a critical link in the chain of the entire Foundry. This is where we forge the next generation of aviators, air crewmen, maintainers, and warfighters. So before I say anything else, let me just start with a heartfelt thank you. Thank you for what you do every single day to keep our Navy strong. As your CNO, I want you to hear my priorities straight from me this morning. No filters, so let's get into it a bit. If you take away nothing else from the conversation this morning, take away this. Let there be no doubt that the single greatest and enduring competitive advantage against our adversaries is all about you, the sailors. Not the aircraft, not the simulators, not the technology, it's about you. Simply put, you are the main weapons battery. And I understand the demands you're carrying. High ops tempo, manning gaps, aging infrastructure, training pipelines pushed to the limit. You're doing more than ever and you're doing it under pressure, yet you continue to deliver world-class readiness every single day. That's exactly why my priority is and will remain sailors first. We are cutting the administrative drag. We're eliminating requirements that eat your time, and without all of that pressurizing you, it limits your ability to build warfighting skill. We're putting resources where they matter, in training, in maintenance, in quality of service improvements, and giving you the tools you need to master your craft. I want every sailor here to have the time, the trust, and the training they need to dominate the fight. Everything we do in the Navy, I want viewed through an operational lens focused on my three priorities: the Foundry, the fleet, and the way we fight. The reason why is so simple. Our Navy must be resilient, agile, globally present, and combat credible, ready to fight and win decisively today, tomorrow, and well into the future. The Foundry is where we forge readiness. It's where sailors and leaders are made through training, maintenance, and the daily discipline that turns skill into mastery. Here in Pensacola, the Foundry is literally everywhere. It's the classrooms teaching aviation fundamentals, and the simulators where repetition sharpens instinct, and on the line where maintenance keep aircraft safe and lethal. Every pre-flight, every inspection, every student check ride, every emergency procedure you drill, that's all Foundry work. It's where you hone your cognitive advantage and sharpen your intellectual and technical mastery. This is the foundation of naval aviation. What happens here echoes through every carrier air wing and every deployed squadron around the world. The fleet is where the Foundry turns it into real operational advantage. It's our nation's decisive instrument of maritime power. What you produce at NAS Pensacola feeds directly into the fleet's ability to sense, assess, and synthesize and react faster than our adversaries' speed of advance. Every aviator and air crew member you train, every maintainer you qualify, they become part of a global force that hunts submarines, track threats, deliver long-range fires, provides humanitarian relief, and supports the joint fight. You're not just supporting the fleet, you're shaping it. You give our Navy the eyes, ears, reach, and precision that keep us forward and ready. Which brings me to the fight. What our Navy exists to do. Delivering violence on behalf of our nation, to promote our national security and preserve our way of life. Our adversaries are not slowing down. They're fielding new systems, expanding their reach and probing any sign of weakness. But here's the truth. They simply cannot match the training, toughness, and tenacity of our Navy sailors. The fight is not just something over there. It begins right here in the way you train, maintain, and prepare every single day. Pensacola produces warfighters who show up ready to fly, ready to fight, and ready to win. You are the front line of deterrence long before an aircraft ever launches from the decks. You are the crucial link in the chain of naval aviation and a vital part of our Navy's warfighting edge. Your professionalism, vigilance, and commitment have a direct impact on fleet readiness and national security. Stay sharp, stay focused, keep forging in the Foundry, keep building the fleet, and always be ready for the fight. Our nation counts on you, our Navy depends on you, and I am proud and deeply proud to serve alongside you. Pensacola, keep charging. You're making the Navy stronger every single day and providing readiness from the shore. And I really look forward to the questions this morning. And I want to be able to answer all of those. And before I do, I want to give the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy a couple minutes here to introduce himself, and you get to know him. And we truly look forward to your questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, CNO. First of all, it's also my first time here at Pensacola. Very happy to be here along with the CNO in January where the weather is quite nice. A couple of things because we want to get to your questions. The first thing I would like to say is thank you. Thank you all for choosing to serve our country. There's a vanishingly small number of people who are willing to do that, and even a smaller number of people who can actually qualify to do it. So, you know, myself, the CNO, the Secretary of the Navy are deeply appreciative that you do this. You know, for our new accession sailors and new pilots, thank you for making the choice. And then for everybody here who's training them to help them get ready, thank you for deciding to stay in. Right? That's not an obvious, you know, easy answer for most people, and your willingness to continue to serve is greatly appreciated. So thank you very much, and then for your families, also please pass to them. We're very appreciative of their support of you and their willingness to allow you to continue to serve. So having said that, let's get to your questions.
Don't be shy. Am I turned on here? Hello?
Not yet. Oh, I'm on. So.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
Morning, sir.
Good morning.
My question is, under the 2026 VBA guidelines, how is leadership encouraging CEOs to use advanced request alignments, command and management position to ensure the extreme top performing sailors are forced to choose between career progression and geographic stability?
Yeah, did you get the very beginning of it?
No.
Can you just say the whole question one more time? You were cut out about it at the very beginning. I want to make sure I hear it all.
Yes, sir. Under the 2026 VBA guidelines, how is leadership encouraging CEOs to use advanced request alignments and command advanced position to ensure that extreme top performing sailors aren't forced to choose between career progression and geographic stability?
Okay. I'll let MCPON really give you a more detailed answer on that because he gets this question quite a bit, but I'll kick off while he's kind of shaping his answer to that. That there is nothing more important to me in any command than the influence the commanding officer has on the very thing you're talking about. That person, he or she, really sets the culture and climate of that command and how the persons in that command feel like they're truly in a merit-based and merit-rewarded system. And so, you know, that they set that tempo and that ability to believe they're immersed in an environment that truly recognizes that. So it's extremely important that that be set first and foremost. The details of how the balance goes between feeling like the only way I can advance is to maybe, you know, move away from home port or from the existing command that I'm in order to do that, or stay within that existing command so that I can balance talent is part of that equation. And so I think there's a necessity there that there's good education within the command on how that works, because there is opportunity within the command that I think's widely not understood well on how you do that and stay within that command. But I think you have to also recognize that if you want to move up in the Navy, that sometimes there's going to be some sacrifice on geographic location. And that's just the nature of it, because I can't always guarantee that the job that I need you to go to at certain levels in your career progression are naturally going to be at the same place that you are. So I never want to limit your opportunity to actually continue to move up and at the expense of forcing you to stay at a place and basically have to make that decision to stay there and not actually get the next rank. So I think education's a piece of that, opportunity's a piece of that, and offering a good seashore rotation balance on the numbers to make sure there's opportunity to go manage all that are all part of that equation. And MCPON, if you want to pile in from that.
Yeah, so the theme I'll pick up on, and then I'll circle back to your question, is right now, CMP is going through a full billet base review. Because we know right now that our billet base is not correct. All right, so depending on which rating you're in, there's a lot of sea duty, and the only shore duty available to you might be RDC in Great Lakes or recruiting. And so we're trying to get a sense for how much shore duty billets we have to build inside of most ratings in our large kind of geographic areas. So I'm not forcing people necessarily to move all the time. You know, you also may have seen in the news, kind of SecWar has told all of the services to significantly reduce the amount of time the number of PCS moves people have to do in a career. That's pretty easy for the Army and the Air Force. They're largely garrison forces. It's more problematic for us, but we are going through to figure out where we can make those investments. So when you do screen, you have at least the opportunity to stay in one place if that's what you want. Right? I mean, everybody knows, like, all of us get to a certain age with families and kids and spouses working. You know, if I can stay in the same place, that'd be great. But, you know, we're also the Navy, and that's not possible all the time. And so I think, so we got to go fix our billet base to reduce the kind of stress you feel to always have to go move if you want to get promoted. Now, to your question on how am I making sure commanders know they have that authority, I don't know how to make it more clear than in the way we've, you know, laid the policy out. Now, what's required for that, though, is those billets have to exist at the local command, right? So CA2P, there's got to be a billet for you to get CA2P'd into. And for ARA, there has to be a billet that you can get realigned to. So I think we've been pretty clear on the CO's authority to do that. But I'll take feedback from the COs in the room if that's not clear. But I think from a policy perspective, we're laying flat. But we do, to the CNO's point, we need to fix our billet base, because he and I both agree asking people to do 5, 6, 7 years at sea is ridiculous, and we want to get away from that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, McConnell. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
My question today is, the rollout of Section Agenda AI platform, what's the expectation for the integration of AI and AI tools into defense cyber operations in the future and beyond?
You know, we just spent about 2.5 hours on an airplane talking about this exact question. And I want it integrated in every single thing we do. I can think of nothing that's done in our Navy in which at some point in that there's not artificial intelligence making me do it better. And so that goes from routine administrative tasks, which we're all using through ChatGPT and similar type large language models, all the way into automatic target recognition and high-end warfare and rules of engagement theory. and then everything in between needs to be enabled from how I'm doing planning, routine maintenance production, and certainly cryptographic type analysis. You can think of all types of things there where anything that I am doing, a human is looking at something in the intelligence world. Wouldn't it be better if I had some type of AI system facilitating that intelligence person with that? And so, I just was telling, I'll give you a quick submarine example to this. Now, I'm probably going to task this too, so, whoever hears this in the submarine force, this is coming. I want to be able to raise our photonics mast, first of all, and it shouldn't have to rotate. You can just have phased cameras. So the fact that we have to spin that thing is kind of weird in itself. But we should be able to take a picture, 360 degrees, lower that scope, okay, and then AI analyze everything that was in that field of view, and not only say what it is, how far it is, what the classification of it is, what the speed, range, and solution is in the fire control system. Okay? That's just a snippet of what these types of systems can do. So we're behind the ball on leveraging these type of technologies across the board. Now, we're doing a lot with targeting recognition on this. So at the more highly classified, efforts are going on through some of these smart systems, it's alive and well. Some of the things we're doing in the undersea today on, with all the petabytes of data that we're collecting to sift through it to see what are man-made sources versus, biological sources, it's alive and well. But just within my own office, okay, in the office of the Chief of Naval Operations, I'm not really even leveraging it today. If I wanted, all the folks that just made 06 in the room, I want to send a congratulation letter to them, and I want 10 different letters by me that sound in my voice. I ought to be able to hit a button in my flag writer, give me 10 different letters. So, we're just literally not bringing it to bear fast enough. And so I am all about it. I think it's extremely important. Now, there's, like anything else, there's kind of a haphazard way to go about it, and there's the way we should do it in the Navy. And the way we should do it in the Navy is make things literally program of records so that it gets good oversight by a type commander who's responsible for the integration of these types of systems within our IT infrastructure. There ought to be training done that starts at boot camp on how to really, no kidding, do more than just go to the cursor line in ChatGPT. You ought to understand how algorithms work, how weighting factors work, how training data sets work, how these things are calibrated and tuned, what are the biases that can be interjected. All of that needs to be trained so that people think they know stuff about it, which they don't, so that you know the shortcomings of it. So when it feeds you something that's wrong, you got a sensing of that. But I can think of no place better to integrate it and to get it to full speed than in the intelligence community, and I'm pushing for that really, really hard. Any thoughts on that piece?
He's a CNO, so he hit most of it. But I do think we are, while we wait for the kinds of things the CNO is talking about, we are massively underutilizing it and making our kind of day-to-day maintenance administrative tasks more seamless and routine. So I think that's an area where we need to really accelerate our use of large language models, to help our workflows. As a guy who grew up doing maintenance throughout, most of my enlisted career, the fact that I'm going through 17 different books to make sure I've got this tag out written exactly correct is asinine,
Well, I would say on that, there is no one holding back commanders and work center supervisors and, LPOs, the like, from doing that today. There is nothing that restricts a work package or anything like that from being generated through Gen AI or whatever AI that can do that. You're only held accountable that it's accurate,
right,
that the references are good, that the procedural steps are right. So how that's created is not being retarded today. So go at it, have at it. Anyway, I just want to let you know from a policy perspective, you are free release by the Secretary of War to inculcate Gen AI and other AI large language models into our day-to-day work today. And I recommend everybody take that seriously and do it. And get smart at using it. And I welcome the feedback of use cases where you've done it and you've proven that you've actually improved in some way. Shoot that stuff to me so I can get the word out. Appreciate the question.
Regarding the Secretary of War's Military Fitness Standards Memorandum and now that 6425, fully realize the warfighter vision while ensuring integrity for the free rule failure. Would the Navy consider establishing a dedicated physical readiness rating based on the existing TICOM levels? Moving this from the unit level to a professionalized third-party rating and more desktop level would remove inherent conflicts of interest, standardized procedures,
Yeah, I'm going to talk a couple things there, and I want MCPON to give you maybe a little more detail on our physical readiness standard changes, if he wants to chime in on that piece. First of all, if I tell you I want sailors to be first in my worldview, then that means that I want you to be treated like and held accountable to something that mirrors a world-class athlete. That means across mind, body, and spirit, I want to make you whole. And that's why we've rebranded, and you may have heard this, and hopefully you hear more about it, culture of excellence into total sailor fit to fight. Okay? To me, a culture of excellence is the result of having sailors fit to fight. Okay? And that's why I retitled that. So that means the way I feed you, the way the barracks quality, the training and mastery that I do. And certainly the physical readiness of everyone in this room has to be an integral part of that. I think we were pretty good coming into COVID, and I think we took a pretty big step backwards in COVID. We just did, okay? And I think the Secretary of War recognizes that. He walks around, he sees people. I mean, this is, what he's talking about there can be a bit obvious to most, that we're perhaps not in the best shape across all of the joint force that we should be. So I welcome the changes that the physical readiness test came back for general purpose testing to 2 times per year. Okay, I understand there's different ways that we're doing the physical fitness body fat composition measurements. I welcome that. I welcome that the fact that we've earmarked folks that are in combat arms need to prove that they have a test that's coupled to what they do in combat arms. I think all that's great. And for those who don't like that, then they need to, I think, take a step back and reflect that we're in the profession of arms. And I would be disingenuous if I didn't think, when I tell you you're the main weapons battery, that you don't think of your body as part of the weapons system. So that goes to me too. In fact, it's interesting. I got a question, I don't know, it was a couple months ago. It's like, hey, are all the admirals taking the PRT? And, I'm 62 years old. Yes, I take the PRT. These guys watch me. I run the PRT, okay? I do the push-ups, I do the plank, and my wife feeds me like a thoroughbred. So it's important that you treat your body, your mind, and your soul. All of that needs to be at the level that we need you to be to win against our peer adversaries. We have to be at that level, okay? That's one of my enduring overmatches. So that's why it's so important that I treat everyone in this room so special. And so I welcome the changes to our physical fitness standards. I think it's right on the money. And MCPON, any other comments on that? I think it'd be good for them to hear from you.
Yes, sir. Right. So, to your question, are we going to create a rating that does this? The answer to that is no. It would be way too small, and I would have a hard time developing a career path from E4 to E9. Now, while we were at Fleet Forces, we did run a pilot that centralized the physical readiness exam to the installation level. And so now that, he's the CNO and I'm the MCPON, we're applying pressure to actually make that the way we do our PRTs in the coming years. So to your point on, I'll go see a disinterested person. You can think of a GS or, installation employee, and, it's like just the facts. They do the thing, you take the test, you either pass or you don't. And then that does a couple of things. It's obviously fair, and the standards are applied, at least from that human being, the same to every human being who goes to them. And then it offloads all of the administrivia and the worry of doing that whole program from, the thousands of commands I have in the Navy. So we're trying as much as possible. The CNO talked about it in his opening comment. pull as much of that stuff out of kind of the S5 command level and centralize it as much as possible. Because we do think in the long run we'll get a better product, and that's across all kind of collateral duties like that. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Hey, when I came, we were flying here, and I was again getting horsed up here on this entire base. And I may not have this number exactly right. I think it was in the PowerPoint, but 126 tenant commands.
Yep.
So how many PRT programs are there at a minimum?
126.
126. How many urinalysis programs are there?
126.
126. Well, don't you think it'd be logical if I told everybody whose social ends in a 6 to show up to this building and pee today, instead of having 126 people run a urinalysis program? Wouldn't it be logical if this is your birth month, you show up, you do your push-ups, plank, and run, or whatever, and just have like that all done right here in this beautiful hangar, or somewhere else more logical, instead of having 126 individual programs? Can you imagine that what I can do to the collateral duty list if I go centralize some of these big ones like that to offload that from being run by every single command? Okay? And let people actually focus on what their in rate is, which is the most important thing they ought to be doing. And if you don't have enough job in your in rate, then tell me that. And I'll start consolidating those. Okay? I'll fix that too. So I think there's plenty to do. And the last thing I want people in this room to do is having to be worried about running these types of programs. So I am 100% behind centralizing this. And I think it can be run by an installation. We piloted this in Norfolk, ran well. I just hadn't got there yet where I'm implementing this across the Navy yet. Yeah.
Our question is, with the change in PRT instruction, is there any talk of adding a permanent CNO building capacity?
Yeah, no. Not that I know of. I don't know of anything like that. In fact, it's contrary to what I just said.
Right.
Yeah. In fact, if there's going to be a billet, then that's going to be their primary duty, and they're going to run it for a lot of people. So it's not going to be necessarily a rate or anything like that, but it could be somebody assigned to a shore duty and it just does nothing every day but runs the PRT for a big, massive naval air station like this. That itself would be a big undertaking. But imagine what that would do to just, again, offload that from the 126 commands. And I would tell you, it will also be run better. It'll be higher standards. The people that do it, that's what they do, right? And so the entire mechanism, in fact, I would argue that the remediation program could be centralized.
Yep.
I mean, why do I have a remediation program being done 126 times? And so all that to me could be centralized. The Air Force already does it like this, and I think they are the kind of the service that leads forward most on kind of efficiency, and I think we can learn from that. You know, the way they do it, kind of when you come in the base, come in the gate, this is on your analysis, you know, basically the gate guard will like even tell you, hey, today's, you know, Social Security number ending in 5 day, show up to building 132, and, you know, you just go to building 132, do your thing, and go back to your, you know, go get it done. So, you know, I just think there's just so much like that. In fact, I'll go a step further since I got the pulpit here on this thing. I would tell you, if you go look through your, whatever it's called, the 1300 notice, you know, of collateral duties, I would argue most of those things either need to be a composite primary duty or they just need to be part of somebody else's primary duty already. And so just kind of the whole idea of collateral, I'd like to just go kill that whole thing. So if you think of things that I'm mandated to do, like let's think like SAPR, you know, as a mandated thing, there ought to be somebody that goes and does those types of programs, and that is their primary duty, is they run people-centric, you know, destructive behavioral programs. And to me, that ought to be kind of the primary duty. But they don't just have to do that one. They can do several of those. And that becomes kind of a, you know, a way to go get that offloaded, centralized, I think improved. So I think, you know, look forward to, I think, centralizing some of these collaterals with command fitness being one of them.
Yeah.
Now, break. I'll just say this before MCPON. That has nothing to do with commands running their fitness programs to get fit. This is assessment I'm talking about. This is testing, okay? So the esprit de corps and given the opportunity to work out 5 times a week the way we're supposed to, all of that's commander's business. And I welcome the creativity that we have holistically not been good at in the Navy to tell me how to best solve that. We have not done a good job at providing the opportunity to work out in the Navy in general.
Yeah, so while not, specific billets, one of the things is, because you're at a training command and is as N1 and Recruiting Nation has gotten very good at bringing, new sailors into the Navy, we allowed our accession pipeline school manning infrastructure to deteriorate too much. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know, I'm stating the obvious. And one of the things we did when we were drawing that down was we got rid of, like when I went through A school, we had like kind of red ropers, these people who did time like helping us get acclimated, and they would run our PT and help us march to school and all that. And so as we look at our billet base and how to expand shorter D opportunities, that is a thing, that is coming back into kind of our thought process for our accession schools. So I'm not expecting somebody who's on podium to also do that, and so while not specifically a CFL, we are looking at kind of bringing the red ropers back in some number to help manage all that stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Good
morning.
In regard to the future of aviation, when will the Navy get funding to replace jetty pools and building infrastructure that the aviation schools commanding for future aviation?
Well, that whole pitch I just gave you on Foundry is something that has been underinvested for decades. Even with the CNO, who has made a priority for sailors and Foundry to invest in the crumbling, in some cases crumbling infrastructure of our Navy, it goes from hangars that need a lot of repair, to piers that need work, to just paving the roads on bases, to just general support services. I find when I get to the Pentagon that that's a tougher nut to crack than I anticipated. Everything comes within some type of constrained structure. It has been my job, and I've got Congress, men and women and senators alike that are, I think, really, really behind putting money toward this. But closing the deal is a challenge to go do this in general, because capabilities rule the day in the 5-sided building. They just do. Okay, so it's very easy to kind of get enamored, if you will, with new ship construction, okay, with new aviation construction, with bombs, with technologies. And so, because if you think about it, the Defense Industrial Base, that's what they do. And so what has to pay the bill to reconcile the books on that historically has been infrastructure, Foundry, and sailor programs, okay, including manpower. So that's my job. That's why I literally exist, is to go emphasize the thing that we actually need to put money into to ensure that we can launch the greatest Navy in the world from it. People forget a lot of times that even with 50% op tempo aboard a ship, that we spend 50% of our time here and ashore, at a minimum, okay? And the more senior you get, that number grows, okay? I spend literally all my time ashore now, and it started as 50-50. So that's our minimum. Yet, that's the place we don't want to, find ourselves not wanting to properly fund. So it's a challenge. I know in the Hampton Road area in particular, the representatives there recognize it, the master jet base there at Oceana. They drive in and they see hangars that I'm having to open the door with yellow gear because the automatic door opening doesn't work. I've literally got, the lighting structures and fixtures from the overhead, corroding through because of where these things sit next to the shoreline, because they haven't been, properly maintained, falling. I've got, electrical infrastructure within those hangars that have not been looked at in decades, okay? And so all that needs to be revamped. I'm big on tension fabric. I would like to see more tension fabric hangars installed in places while I'm actually working the main effort to get the, the full up type hangars like this built. So there's a whole campaign that's being run by Vice Admiral Gray, Vice Admiral Jablon, and the aviation enterprise leaders to try to put money into that type of infrastructure. It's slow, it doesn't move as fast as I want it to, but I can tell you the problem statement is clearly understood.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Morning, sir. Morning, MCPON. Made it into 2000s over with an ASC. With the Navy's goal of achieving 75 mission-capable ships facing challenges on aging fleet and maintenance backlogs, what specific steps are being taken to improve on-time maintenance and overall readiness?
Yeah, you might as well ask me what are you doing to solve cancer? That is the holy grail of all questions, is something that I have scores of people working on, because all roads lead to maintenance delays, depot delays, new construction delays, to making our Navy be the best and brightest it can possibly be. And so we work on this every day. So let me break down a few things just to give you a spattering of some of the things that we're doing. At the end of the day, who does all the work on our ships? Machines or humans?
Humans.
By 90%, it's all humans. So might one of the problems be workforce? Would you believe that wouldn't be beyond your imagination to think there's a workforce challenge? And so it is in my personal opinion that we were able to deliver ships with less technical capability 25 years ago than we are today. So might the common denominator be something that deals with the workforce? So that's where the majority of the effort's going into. Now, that has to go to, there's a lot in that. So there's training to make a craftsman. So I have to make sure the training pipelines are sound to go do that. There's a number of people I can get into that population to actually stay there when attrition is not where it should be. Attrition should be less than 10%, it's between 10 and 20%. So I'm losing too many people, therefore I can't bring in enough people, therefore I can't train them to do the job, and it all becomes kind of a self-licking ice cream cone a bit. The unicorns of all of this that make it work are these middle-level managers that I don't have enough of. The shop foreman, okay, the LCPO, okay, if you will, at the maintenance facility, that know how to keep the critical path on track when you get derailed a bit and get it right back on critical path again, because their experience knows how to go do that, okay? Now, regardless if I go make the craftsman the greatest person in the world, I've got him retained, I've got a good culture, and I've got good mental level leadership that is translating day-to-day activities into production output, won't matter if they don't have the parts they need. So I have pretty fragile supply chains. So I need to improve the resiliency of supply lines. That means because I don't have that, I have to back off and order that stuff way before the availability starts. Okay? That includes airplanes too. So if you're in aviation maintenance, it's the same issue. You can't, I can have a genius there that's perfectly trained. If they don't have the part, they're not repairing it that day. So supply has to be part of this. So that's a key element to this piece. Okay? And then the last thing I'll tell you that has the most return on investment is planning. All right, so the actually getting the planning milestones done before these things begin has historically been underwhelming. And so to make sure I've got the planning capacity, which takes engineers, and that's a whole other set of trade skills that I need to do advanced planning for large-scale maintenance availabilities, even in aviation maintenance, big ship maintenance, and new construction. So planning has to be done well in advance. That drives the buying of the long lead time material, and then a trained workforce. That's kind of just the initial conditions to get into the thing to stand a chance to do well. So if I don't have that healthy, then we're never going to deliver this on time. All of those things are being worked, okay? And so that's the key. So now, can I do more with what I've got while I'm fixing those things? And the answer to that is yes, of course. And how many people have heard of combat surge ready in here? Combat surge ready? Okay, that's not surprising. So we have a fourth generation model. How many people have deployed in here? Okay. When you deployed, you were part of a fourth generation model. And regardless of your community, it all looks the same, just has different names. But you had some type of basic phase that moved into some type of advanced phase, that moved into some type of integrated phase, that moved to a certification event, then you deployed, and then you came back and reset, and it all started again. It's a conveyor belt of fourth generation. So every day in the Navy, we have about 300 ships in our Navy generally. So I've got about 100 deployed worldwide. Now, if you think about this, in World War II and up to really to modern times, I've only really, at any given time, short of the war itself, but post-World War II, only had about 100 ships deployed worldwide, combat ships. So that used to be a ratio of like 5 to 1. Now it's a ratio of 3 to 1. So from an efficiency perspective, we should all pat ourselves on the back that from 3 to make 1 worldwide is pretty good. So 300 ships generates 100 worldwide deployed units. Pretty good. I've got another 100 that are on the blocks. So I've got 100 ships that are sitting somewhere in a depot maintenance period. So how many does that leave left?
100.
100, okay. All right, check in to see if you're paying attention. Okay. So that 100, can I do more with that other 100? Historically, we would say when you're in basic phase that I had no combat power, I had no combat power, I had no combat power, and now I add combat power once I'm certified to go. So you're a 0 and then become a 1 right at the end at your Comp 2X or whatever your certifying event is for your community of practice. Well, I reject that. If we start fighting a peer adversary, we will flow forces into the theater that are not major combat operationally certified. Would you agree with that? Everybody's going. So can I gain a certification en route to that last certification that allows me to be competent enough to go into combat but not be the full up round? And the answer to that is yes. So that's the goal, that 80% of our non-deployed, non-depot Navy be combat certified, combat surge ready certified. And that gets me this additional certification that says I can shoot, I can defend myself, I can communicate, and I can integrate. Okay? If you can do all those things, we're going to say the acceptable level of risk for you is good enough, and we will put you into combat. And so that's the Navy's goal, is 80% of all forces. That's all surface ships, that's all submarines, that's all aircraft carriers, and that's all air wings, or be subject to that 80%. So that's the vision there, to do more with that other 100 than we're doing today. Now, to do that requires stable manning that we've never seen. We're getting there. Stable ordnance. I got to load them out with stuff. They're not going to be very combat effective if their cells are not filled with ammo, right? They got to have supply parts in the lockers, and they got to be trained and certified. So there's a pesto part of that effort as well. Probably more than you asked for, but it gives me a little bit of a chance to talk to you all about this Combat Surge Ready initiative. Does that help you?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and if I can, CNO, the one thing I'll add to that is one of the things we did many, many years ago was kind of divested ourselves in what is commonly referred to as eye-level maintenance done by Navy sailors. And so we're bringing SIMAs back. You know, we're doing 2 right now, kind of as a pilot. And because we've realized that really, on top of all the things the CNO talked about, I also have to get better at just doing maintenance myself as a sailor. We used to do a lot more eye-level maintenance. And when we made this decision, you know, when the wall came down and peace had broken out all over the world, that we were going to divest ourselves as sailors doing that. And what has happened is it's slowly creeped into the depot. And so I can't catch up in the depot because I'm doing a bunch of maintenance in depot that I got no business doing there. And so I want to get back to sailors being able to do that. And the beginning of that is bringing SIMAs back. You've probably heard the Secretary of the Navy and other people in Congress talk about right to repair. All of this is designed to get sailors back to fixing our equipment, which I think everybody who joined the Navy in a technical or mechanical rate actually joined to do. We want to fix our stuff. And so we just got to give you the tools to do it and set you free, and you can go fix anything we need you to.
How many folks serve on ships in here? So I just kind of get a population of ships in general. It could be any ship. How many people can believe that, you know, that more times than not, when a complex piece of equipment breaks, we have to call for reach back support? How many people have called back for that via CASREP? We ought to all hold our head low with that. When we say we cannot fix our own ships at sea, okay, then that's a bad day. That should be so rare that it should be something that you just either don't have the part or you just can't figure it out. Even microelectronics. You don't have anybody on board that can like resolder a capacitor into that circuit board. You don't have anybody on board that can do a temporary weld. You don't have anybody on board that knows how to go, do a, some type of repair to a, relap a valve or reshape a shaft. I mean, we should not have to have so much reach back. So what MCPON's talking about with short intermediate maintenance activities, SEMAs, is I'm trying to put a shot in the arm to bringing back the competency to become self-sufficient. Now the side benefit of that, if you're in a home port like in Norfolk or San Diego, it goes to the original question that we talked about, is more seashore rotation availability. So wouldn't it be nice if you're in an HM&E rating, you're at sea, and then you roll to the SEMA and you continue doing what you should be doing, and then you just roll back to sea, and you don't have to move from Norfolk, and San Diego as a start. I can see it coming to Mayport too. Mm-hmm. So I'm just telling you, that's the future here, is get sailors back to becoming, because here's the news flash. You know the person that you actually got on the other end of the line when you called back for that reach back? Who do you think that is? It was like you, a year ago. I mean, there's not any kind of like magic out there that somebody got some injection. It's just somebody that has done that repair enough now that they're getting paid a lot of money from some contractor to go do essentially what they did when they were in the Navy. So to me, it's an indictment on particular my chief's quarters, and he knows I've said this before, that we're not getting our sailors at the level of competency they need to be to fix their own gear. So take that as a warning. Tell your commanding officers, let me fix it. And convince the commanding officer to take the risk to let our sailors do more. And so I think part of that, and while I'm preaching here a bit, is we're oversubscribed at sea in particular. So what I can do, instead of spending time doing that, I can push that thing over to a CAS rep because I got too much going on, period. So it allows me kind of to decompress that repair effort and offload that to outsourcing that to the, to some, request for assistance. And so I want to get away from that. That's not going to work in high-end combat. That's just not going to work. So I need all of us to rise and do what we're paid to do within your rates and be offended if you can't fix anything on your ship or in your airplane. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, Masters and Officers. Professor Masters. As the Navy embraces emerging technologies, how do you ensure a balance between fostering innovation and upholding the core values and traditions that historically define the Navy's success?
Yeah, I'll give a shot at it, and then MCPON think about that too. Yeah. One of the things that Secretary Phelan, our Secretary of the Navy, talks about quite a bit is your exact question. He recognizes as a very successful business person that the way he made his success is embracing, leveraging, and bringing to bear innovative emerging technologies. He also recognizes, probably more so now than he did with the first day he was in the job, that he's coming to an organization that's 250 years old with a lot of tradition, okay? A lot of hard-fought, blood-born tradition. Things we actually like about ourselves, things that we care about, our legacy, okay, our culture, our things that we're proud of, the giants whose shoulders we walk on today, okay. He understands that more than I think he ever thought he could. So how do you now, do exactly what you say? Be edgy on bringing things in that have this, technological difference on how we do business, yet retaining the actual things that make us who we are. And so, I haven't cornered the market on that, but my personal opinion is both of those things can coexist beautifully, okay? So some of the things go to, so on this side of maintaining who we are, those are standards. Those are core values. Those are treating people with respect and dignity. Those with valuing our tradition. Those are how we do ceremonies, how we reflect on the people of the past and what they did to make us who we are. Those are our, our uniforms, okay? And not losing, going so far off the reservation that we lose culturally what we look like. That's our mottos, okay? Forged by the sea, the few, the proud. Okay, those are the things over in this camp that we can never, cut corners on. Over here is, how do I do exactly what we talked about with the AI discussion and actually just get better at what we do and embrace technology? And I think a lot of that has to do with education. And that's how we educate the workforce in this room and across our Navy on how to think differently about using the tools that you take for granted every day with your iPhone and understand those at a deeper, more technical level so you understand how they are being applied to Navy and Marine Corps kit and actually just getting smarter on how to bring those things to bear.
Yeah, and I think what I'll add to what the CNO said is, I think to answer your question fully, you have to determine what those core things are. The CNO talked about some of them. It's not the Navy since 1775 has been evolving to new technologies. We went from sailing ships to old Ironsides to battleships to aircraft carriers. We've seen massive technological insertion throughout the history of the Navy. And so, submarine launched ballistic missiles from submarines. So we've always had to deal with this. I think the important thing is identifying what those core attributes are and guarding those jealously, right? And so, like the boss said, high standards. Okay, now that's high standards of technical competence and kicking people's ass. We're back-to-back World War champions, right? We don't want to be 2-1, all right? We want to be 3-0 and 4-0, right? And so, what are those things that ensure that happens? And as long as you stay true to those, all of the rest of the kind of nonsense, I think, falls out. And my predecessor used to make this joke about, the old generation has been complaining about the new generation of the Navy since 1776. All right? It's been going on for as long as we've existed, and as long as we stay focused on, CNO talked about it earlier in his remarks, we exist to kick people's ass. That's why we're here. Now, we generally hope we don't have to do it, but at the end of the day, that's our job. And so as long as we stay focused on being able to do that with high standards while treating everybody with respect, I think we'll be just fine regardless of what technology comes our way.
I would just add, because he teed it up so perfectly, you'll hear this phrase a lot, the senior leaders in their pitches and speeches, is the character of war changes every day. And what they mean by the character are the characteristics of it. You see this really in spades with Russia-Ukraine, the extent to which that war is being fought with unmanned technologies. So you see that's the character of that war, yet the nature of war never changes. And so what is the nature of war? It is the deliverance of violence, okay, that men do to each other, okay? It's that nature of warfare never changes. And it is that blunt instrument that we're talking about of delivering violence that makes it so reprehensible that it actually has national power. So that it actually can be a tool to shape our vital national interest. And so that's why the nature of war has never changed from the beginning, but the character changes all the time. So I think to get to your point at a very theoretical level, understanding those two things is okay. We have to be able to deliver, overwhelming violence, but the same way, the way I do that can change every single day.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll add to, you can sit down. It's there's a lot of talk about Ukraine and unmanned and stuff, but if you go look at what's actually happening there, that is a meat grinder of people dying. Like the Russians have lost an insane amount of people, because they're just willing to just throw people at that conflict like they're cordwood. So yeah, unmanned has been kind of an interesting thing there. But at the end of the day, those front lines have not moved a lot because there's a human being on either side of that line defending that line, right? And people are dying all the time over there. So, to the boss's point, the nature of war is what it is. And at the end of the day, it will be, God forbid, all of us in this room on one side of a line defending it against another human being.
You can have a seat. Thank you. I want to say one thing because it's kind of one of these things that we talk a lot about at the Pentagon is, you know, they'll ask me, Admiral Caudle, and you know, why do you want to invest in something when you know that thing perhaps is not survivable inside the weapon engagement zone? Okay, I get that question quite a bit. Can anyone tell me a time when we have fought outside the weapon engagement zone? What does that even mean? Aren't we always in the weapon engagement zone? Is there ever been a fight that's not by definition in the weapon engagement zone? That's the definition of fighting. And so, you know, my good friend Eric Smith, for the Marines in the room, he jokes about it too. It'd be like saying, I don't need a Marine Corps because the enemy's got machine guns. You know, and so yeah, I still need a Marine Corps even though the enemy's got machine guns, okay? So it's our goal as a force to take our kit and learn how to maneuver that kit to keep it survivable, and that's through deception, that's through emission controls, that's through feint maneuvers, that's through, you know, manipulation, that's through cognitive sciences, that's through all types of things that I bring to bear so that eventually I get that platform in the position to unleash its arsenal against the enemy. That's the nature of this. So no, I do not regret ever purchasing things that I'm working on. It's my goal to actually prevent it from ever being targeted. And that's the nature of warfare. Prevent yourself from being targeted. Okay, and so I'll just give you that. So when you worry about, you know, what vehicle you might find yourself in, may not be the latest stealth aircraft or the stealth ship or a submarine, it's okay. We work every day to make you survivable and bring your offensive kit to bear. Okay? What time we got? We're still going, right? Still good. Next one.
Recipients have understood the critical importance of maritime integration. In light of this, what steps can staff and non-commissioned officers take to improve training for our Marines to ensure they can operate seamlessly alongside the Navy aboard ships?
You ready to answer that?
Yes,
I'll
sir.
let you do the non-commissioned officer integration piece and what you can do at that level. I want to spend a couple minutes as the tee up. It doesn't have a whole lot to do with your question directly, it's tangentially. In the Navy, okay, I just want to give you an understanding of what's been going on a little bit across all the different conflicts that have been popped up recently. Midnight Hammer, familiar with that? Midnight Hammer, wow, okay. Well, we actually went in and we bombed Iran's nuclear facilities. Everybody familiar with that? Okay, good. Whew. All right, that was the operational name of that operation. So, who got most of the credit for that was B-2 bombers, because they can carry the big mother-of-all bomb, and they dropped those down the chute, blew it up, and did all that. How many people knew there was an SSGN part of that? Okay, so the Navy was there. Navy shot Tomahawks in that, okay, break. How many people knew we actually struck Nigeria? Did strikes. It was in open source. You should know this. We actually struck the T-LAM. Surface ship, Paul Ignatius, was part of that, okay? So there's SSGN in the Persian Gulf. There's a DDG out in the Atlantic there, and doing that bit of business. And then there comes Absolute Resolve, which is the apprehension, federal law enforcement apprehension of Maduro and his wife. You think the Navy was involved in that? You think the Marine Corps was involved in that? There has probably never been, in any recent time, a more joint force coalition operation than that operation. In fact, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is about to send me this little sexy picture. It's a picture of the Iwo Jima that they've got Delta Force helicopters on one end. They got MB-22s in the middle all spun up. The Iwo Jima itself, of course, Navy ship. The picture is being taken by an MQ-9 drone, okay, the Air Force is operating, with an uplink being, to the satellite to get the picture off is being done by Space Forces, okay? So, and then and of course, Marines and sailors on the Iwo itself. So there's probably never been a more joint force operation than this thing in a long, long time. So I just want to let you know how you train and integrate into the joint force is the way we fight today. Okay, it is a complete team effort. It has to be a team effort. All right? Now, we are very expeditionary, our ships and Marine Corps. We get there first, we can help set the conditions, but we don't have the mass to actually close the deal, and that will take a joint force effort to do that. But I just want to let you know, these conflicts that are going on are just displaying naval combat power in spades, and I couldn't be more proud of that, and I just wanted you to have a little bit of that in your hip pocket. So maybe on the NCO piece.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, this will sound like somewhat like duh, but I think the best thing NCOs can do, like, you know, when you embark on a ship, you know, this is sailors and Marines, is the NCOs demonstrate what that relationship is supposed to look like, right? So any of you watch the little docu-series Marines on Netflix? Anybody seen that? Yeah, a couple, right? So there's kind of this funny part at the, you know, in episode 1 when the Marines embark on the big deck out of Japan. You know, the people filming the documentary got a great deal of joy out of kind of filming sailors complaining about Marines eating all the chow and using all the gym equipment, and the Marines making fun of Navy people for not using the gym and being fat, right? And so some of that is it's just kind of like our kind of normal inner service stuff, where we like to tease each other. But to the boss's point, at the end of the day, if you go all the way back, and this goes to the one question we got earlier about kind of our tradition, we've always been kind of one team, the Navy and the Marine Corps, right? And so I think, you know, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Smith, and the last couple CNOs, and now this CNO, is trying to get us back to that, you know, because for the last 20 years, we've kind of lost a little bit of our amphibious, you know, kind of teaming abilities. And so, with the exception of some few exceptions. And so I think the best thing our NCOs can do is model what that behavior looks like. As an NCO, you'll have Marines or sailors, you know, where this will be the first time they're doing, you know, an ARGMU deployment. You know, and talking to them about, hey, what that looks like. You know, yes, it's going to take longer to eat. That's okay, because they're our teammates. Does that make sense? You just got to model the right behavior. And when you're leading up to getting on ship, or you're on the Navy side waiting to get Marines, is clearly kind of communicating how we treat each other and, you know, the things we will have to do together to certify to go do that ARGMU deployment. I mean, that's what we do. So,
you know, I may be speaking out of a little bit out of tune here, but it's my perception as a senior naval officer that our career path training opportunities we give folks in the Navy do not, in general, emphasize joint integrated operations sufficiently. I think the Navy side, not the Marines, I think a general Marine at a certain stage in their career knows more about the Navy than the Navy does about what the Marines do. And so I think, you know, to me, all roads lead to being smarter. And so I think, you know, part of this is just revamping tactical curricula out there that enhances this integration and thinking of how combined arms fighting works at a different level than we have historically done in the Navy is also part of this equation. And that goes to leadership schools for NCOs ought to be talking about this. And just to educate people on what is it the Marines actually do once we put them ashore. You know, how do they set up their C2 structure? You know, how do they actually set up their HQ? How do they get, you know, how they do sustainment and resupply? You know, we ought to be more familiar with those things at a lower level than I think we are. And when that happens and you educate like that, then you start thinking for each other. You start actually, you know, I start teeing up my operations to actually enhance your operations. But I can't do that if I don't really understand it well. So I think we do a little bit better in just integrated joint training in our pipeline schools. Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Three more questions.
Wyman Ferguson, Secretary of State. My question, not asked this as a prior reservist. Why are some reservists only required to complete one PFA per calendar year, and active and charged governors are required to complete two PFAs per calendar year, when historically, cell regs were required to complete two PFAs per calendar year?
I'll let Big Pond answer that because I didn't know you only had to do one, but if I got anything to do with it, you'll start doing two.
Yeah.
Appreciate the softball.
Yeah.
I'm sure Admiral Lofgren will be happy that you asked me.
Yeah, I wasn't tracking that they also didn't go to 2 with this latest update, so.
Or you think it's like a hole, we just didn't catch it?
No, I'm not sure, sir, but in the instructions it says accelerators are required to complete 1 PFA at a minimum.
Okay, I'll take that one.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that was a good one.
That's a good one. Hey, see me after for a coin.
That was a good one.
Yeah, that was a good one. I give a coin to Stump the Dummy, and you got 2 dummies up here.
Yeah, got us both.
He got us both, so it's good.
As a follow-up,
Yeah.
are there any conversations or discussions about moving back to the structure of validation? For example, if you achieve an excellent low or above the PFA being validated for the next cycle?
No. No, this is a little bit of the belief that, trying to strike a balance on a way to live. And so I'm actually giving you the chance to actually work out. Doing the physical readiness test ought to be like, whew, because I work out. It's just not a thing for me because, that's like, I go do the PRT. So, I don't want a PRT every month either. No. That'd be like ridiculously on the other side. So I think we're trying to just strike a balance that a couple times a year, you got to go validate or prove that you're within the standards of what we need you to be to actually fight your ship, handle your job, make sure you're healthy. It forces you to go answer some questions about your physical readiness. So it's a balance thing there, to be honest. 2 times a year, I think is right. I think we got it right there. We went away from that obviously for COVID, and now we're just kind of coming back to back to where we were with that. And I don't think you'll see any change on that, and you won't see any way to kind of clip out of it either.
Yeah, and if the question is really about incentives and how do we incentivize doing well on PT, I do think we have work to do there, right? So it doesn't, I've often, or for a while, have had the belief that that you should get some amount of points in your advancement for the score of your PT test, right? So I think that's the real point of your question, is how do I incentivize people to do well on PT? And I think one way conceptually is, remove award points from final multiple score and put PT points there. So
I mean, people would kind of agree with that. Is that a generally accepted premise?
Yeah.
That I get some kind of, we started off with a question about meritocracy. And so there ought to be something that says if I work out hard, then I get something for that. So I'm kind of with MCPON on that. And then the reason I think he's not that enamored with awards is how many people feel the award system is kind of done correctly. Yeah, I don't see a lot of hands on that. We got 2 or 3. Maybe all those are in the ship's office. So, he's a guy who's been, on the giving end of an award, like, woo, man, I got a great award to like, boy, that didn't really hit the mark. Our award system is why I don't think it has to be changed. And I think it's fairly kind of stable with what you kind of get based on the job and responsibility. Tying it to, points to me for advancement has always been a little bit of a hard spot for me.
Yeah, well, and the reason is I already give you a performance mark average for your evals, and the award is just yes, generally what I said about you and your evals.
And I just can't control the standard of that across the Navy. You see what I'm saying? So I can have have and have nots in that world.
Right, which we did for a while when we kind of kicked the floodgates open for NAMs, if you remember. So I would much rather see like excellent low, get 2 points, excellent medium 4, and then work, and that's where those 12 points go. Because now the PT test, other than like, hey, I didn't fail and I got to like be on FEP and worry about collecting 3, at least right now, and getting kicked out of the Navy. Now it actually matters, and it can make a difference, like a legitimate difference in whether or not you get advanced or not.
That's good. Thank you.
Morning, sir.
Morning. We will hold them accountable the way we do for any lack of compliance to a standard. There will be the full discipline spectrum brought to bear. And so, you know, I think I'll put a little bit nuance on your question, is how will we have visibility into that? And so that's always the hard spot when these types of programs that where commanders are kind of left on their own to actually, you know, go do the right thing for their respective commands, and do the ISICs, you know, your major commanders, your 06 command of commanders, do they have insight into how 05 commands under them are actually implementing these things to a high standard? And do they have visibility into that? And that's what I worry more about, is I just can't see it. And so what I've got are people that, you know, other than, you know, some DEOC survey or some other mechanism like that, I don't know what I don't know necessarily. So to me, as the CNO, what I found is being able to see the Navy, I'll call it. How do I see readiness? How do I see the effectiveness of programs? How do I see, you know, the output of this thing to make sure that it's on track? And so before I can hold somebody accountable, I've got to be able to kind of measure it. So I do worry a little bit about that. But certainly if it's brought to the attention we're not complying with the physical readiness standards of, you know, the new requirements, then, you know, it would just go through the full spectrum and start out with some type of get your act together through some counseling shit, and eventually, you know, with the repeated offenses, you're just going to be finding a new job. So, you know, I would say the accountability is just like any other thing that we have where you're not being, you know, dutifully compliant with the requirements.
Yeah, and so like the CNO said, the ISIC is the first line of defense in this area. And then the other thing specifically to your question about BCAs and PT is an answer to an earlier question about centralization. Right, the faster I can get to centralization, the less I have to worry about disparate application of those kinds of things throughout the Navy. So I think it's ultimately getting to centralization, but holding the ISICs accountable for the commands under their ATCOM.
How many folks in here believe that you got to go work out on your own time? See, that's the root cause. That's a root cause of the problem. So when they hear, me and the MCPON going on and on about physical readiness, what's in the paradigm of most people, because I sat in that seat for, the majority of my career too, is like, when do I got time to do that? So if you find yourself saying, when do I have time to go do something that takes care of the main weapon system, see, to me, that's a problem I need to address. And that's what I really want to work on. So that when I ask that question in the future, everybody knows, no, my command gives me time to do that. It is baked into the plan of the day more effectively than I've ever seen it done before. And that is tough for the Navy. We are not a garrison force. You happen to be on a shore duty perhaps right now. But in general, that is a tough nut to crack when your force is afloat. And so I got to think through that. I need help on how to do that more effectively, so you feel like I'm baking physical readiness into the plan of the day.
And that starts with, I think, individual divisions, departments, and commands being able to actually plan. All right, I think one of the places we suffer generally in large swaths of the Navy is we do not plan effectively. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. Some of those things are outside of command's control. Like ATG just shows up one day and is like, hey, congratulations, I'm here to do an inspection that you didn't know was coming. But there's a bunch of stuff that is inside of our control. Like everybody has heard the disparaging ways in which we refer to the POD. It's like the possibilities of the day, it's the potential of the day. We rarely actually call it the plan of the day and stick to it, right? And so to get after what the CNO is talking about, kind of writ large, we need some help from people here doing it, because we do have commands, that have figured, afloat commands that have structured their schedules in such a way where they only have 4-day work weeks and they still win the battle lead. So it is conceivably possible to do everything you're required to do well, and get time to PT. You just got to be willing to put forth the effort to adequately plan and think through what that looks like to make that happen. And we do owe you like removing some of the nonsense off of your plate, like a lot of it. So,
thank you.
I think that was the last question. Or do we got one
We got
more?
one more? Let's do one more.
One more?
One more.
All right, last one.
This is going to be a good one, I can just tell.
Yep.
Good morning, sir. Airman Gordon, my question is, our Navy intends on bringing in 46 sailors this fiscal year, 2,000 more than last year. Will we continue to accept recruits and mental health waivers?
Okay, am I still on? Yeah, I'm on. Okay. First of all, is it not fantastic that we're bringing in like 10,000 more sailors every year than historical average?
Yep.
I mean, that is, you just can't understand that number, how significant that recruiting effort is, okay? When I got to U.S. Fleet Forces in my first 4-star job, the Navy, was just inundated with gaps on operational units at sea. And so with this type of recruiting effort, by the time I leave as CNO in my tenure in the 29, my goal is there are no operational gaps at sea. And that's going to be enabled by this type of recruiting effort. Now, the challenge with it is, and I'm going to get to your question, but I want to give a little bit of explanation en route to the answer I'll give, and MCPON can follow up. The challenge with that is the capacity of boot camp, okay, which has a certain number, which can generate what it can generate just through the physical structure of that, okay? So then that leads to delayed entry, so I can phase, because most people graduate high school at the same time, and so I got to keep people kind of like still interested till I get them, in the door, okay? I get them through their boot camp, and then the next limb fact becomes the capacity of A school and other pipeline schools, and the housing and the quality of service and all that needed to actually get them actually to the fleet, okay? And so that's where I find myself. So the reason that 10,000 additional sailors has not put a big old dent in my gaps at sea today is because I've got about 18,000 students out there today that are just in what we call friction accounts, which are just in, basically what the Navy holds out there in its pipeline structure from boot camp all the way, to delivery, plus other problems like limb-due and pregnancy and other things that prevent people from being assigned to a ship at any given time. That's a lot of overhead. So we're trying to, whittle that down and get more effective and more streamlined to manifest that 46,000 into return on investment. Now, believe it or not, street to fleet, of every sailor, of 100 sailors that come in through boot camp, how many do you think I deliver to the fleet? Somebody shout out a number. 65. So like a 65% return. 90. I lose 10%. Can you believe that? We lose only 10% of our sailors. That's extraordinary. Okay, and maybe it's like 89, maybe it's 11.
It's about 10.
It's like 10%. So we're really good at this. So now I'm coming backing into your question. If that's the case, and the exit criteria for boot camp standard was never changed, the A school standard was never changed on the assessment exams, and the complaint from the commanding officers who get these sailors, I'm not getting inundated with that. I would argue the quality of the people I'm bringing in is right on target. And so giving people a chance to go to preschool before boot camp, having some flexibility in retaking the ASVAB, doing some things that I need to do that actually allows me to shape that cadre of people that normally I perhaps maybe would have rejected, gives me some chance to actually make those sailors viable in the fleet. And I think we're doing a good job there. So the talking point here, and this is what you need to know, is regardless of how I do, of the things I can look more lenient and coming in, which MCPON can speak to some of those specific leniencies perhaps, nothing changes on the output assessment criteria. So if you don't make the cut, then I've got some opportunities to go recycle you and give you another shot in some cases. And if you just don't make the cut, I'm sorry, the Navy's not for you, and we just don't take you. So I don't want you to think there's any change in any of the quality in the exit stage of any of our schools. It's just not the case. So we have opened the door a bit to people we let attempt to come into our organization.
Yes, I came in on a mental health waiver. right? And so I don't think the fact that we're letting people in on mental health waivers significantly degrades their opportunity to succeed in the Navy, right? And to the boss's point, you know, and this has been our history, it's 10%. So our historic street to fleet has been 10% attrition. And so that was like when I came in, and that's kind of what exists now. So I don't think the waiver thing is a big deal. What I do think is a big deal, though, is on the disparate way in which onboarding is conducted throughout our Navy, okay? When somebody graduates from boot camp, for those of you who recently came, you remember this. For those of you who haven't been in a while, I encourage you to go check it out. These are extremely motivated, very happy people, all right? So, and that's after 9 weeks. They're very excited to be a sailor. And then, you know, because I'm in the cradle of net seat, sorry, they'll get to their A school and they start running into petty officers who say things like, we don't do that shit out here in the fleet, don't call me petty officer, we don't do that. We start to chip away at the kind of the foundation that we set in boot camp, right? And then they get to the fleet, and there's all the normal friction that exists in the fleet. And generally, how people are welcomed aboard on the fleet is they may or may not have got picked up at the airport by their command. The command may or may not have even known they were coming. And then they show up, and they're like, okay, hey, you got to do in-doc. It's like 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the command you're at. And then I hand you a stack of qual cards with pre-filled in due dates and say, good luck. And if you're really unlucky, what I do to you right after I give you your qual cards is I send you FSAing for 6 months, or I put you as, you know, TAD to the security department, right? And so the division has no idea who you are, how to take care of you, what's wrong with you, what your life situation is like. And so we're really bad at onboarding, I think, generally, Navy writ large. And, you know, John's opinion is it takes about 1 year at your first operational tour to truly be onboarded. Did they cut me off? Oh, they're like, thought I was getting the hook there. It's about 1 year to truly onboard somebody into the Navy. Now, some of us take it to like a duck to, you know, like a duck to water, and that's quicker. Some people take a little bit more time. But I think generally, if you go look at the commands that have very high unplanned losses, you will find an onboarding program or a command that is not invested in the success of its people. If you go to a command that has very low unplanned losses, you'll find the opposite. And I think that's the real important thing. It doesn't matter what waiver I came in on. What matters most is how much my immediate division, work center cares about me, and how much it's obvious to me they are invested in my success. If I do those things, right, you'll get a sailor that may not stay in for forever, but when they get out, all right, you know, after their 4 or 5 year commitment, you know, they'll talk about the great time they had in the Navy. It's one of the things I'm most jealous of the Marine Corps about, right? There's always a Marine thing. You go talk to anybody who's ever been in the Marine Corps, it was like the best time of their life, usually. They may not have felt that way when they were in, but, you know, now they run around. And I think we're missing some of that in the Navy with our people who are no longer in. And I think it's because we do a poor job of onboarding and inculcating them into our culture.
Yeah. Great, thanks for that last question. When I go out to sea to a ship, I ask to look at 3 programs, and MCPON knows this. I want to see your sponsor program, I want to see your indoctrination or your onboarding program, I want to see how you do initial qualification, how you actually tell the new accession when they come on board, when you got that, what quals they're going to be phased into, and how did you know that with that particular sailor? And so to me, I found those 3 programs directly correlate to the quality of the command I'm visiting. So it's no different here. If you're one of the 126 commands as part of this base, and you're at that level of leadership, it can influence those 3 programs, get those things healthy, and you'll see the return on investment comes pretty quick. So are we done? So hey, thanks for spending your morning with me in the MCPON. It means a lot to me to be able to come and talk to a group this large. And so you get to know me, you get to hear my voice, you get to know where I'm a Southern boy from North Carolina a little bit. And just really am so proud to be the Chief of Naval Operations because of what I am looking at right now, which are just this incredible team of people that I get to meet and shake hands with and just hear your stories and understand what you do. This dedication you give our Navy and our Marine Corps, it's so just overwhelming to me almost. My wife Donna and I love serving, and we love what we do. We love spending time with sailors, and like she's an ombudsman at large, so is MCPON's wife. We got some of the scoop before we came down here and some of the things you're hurting your head from that channel, so we'll be talking to some of the leadership about those things too. And but anyway, it's not lost on me. It takes time out of your day to spend some time with me, so I sincerely appreciate that, and thanks for what you do. And I'll give you a chance to.
Yeah, I said my thanks at the beginning. Great set of questions. Thank you for staying engaged throughout the all hands call, like the boss said. We know it can be a bit much listening to people stand on a stage and say their words. So thank you for what you do every day, and we look forward to seeing you guys out in the fleet.
Thanks again. Thanks, Karen.
Attention.